So there are really two agenda items on my side. One of them is last time we were talking, we talked about my sending through a 5-minute video to join the SEED Commons. And I sent you through a 1-minute video and just wanted to check, is that kind of video what you're after? And if I extend it with another sort of 3-4 minutes with a bit more detail, that will do the trick? And
well, yeah, and even if it's a 10-15 minute with the more detail. So because that the longer one serves multi-fold purpose. Like if we're building open decentralized organizations, it's helping people also understand, oh yes, I love what Graham's up to. I want to go and contribute and work with him and support that aim. So it helps people really understand what you're up to on a larger scale rather than just, superficial high level. It gets into a little bit more of the detail of how people might be able to show up. And in that video, it'd be great if you actually brought up some, open roles or open quests or different ways that people could contribute if they do want to support this cause. So that's what it's used for. So people can go through, look at the Commons organizations and be like, yep, that one sounds like it suits me. That's the 1-minute video you made. Let me dive in deeper to see how I can better support and get a good understanding of what's going on here. And that one, we need it to be a little bit longer and more fulfilled. And that one also really explains how it suits the, the organization and the movement, the Regenerative Renaissance at large. So that people who aren't just wanting to contribute, they also know, oh yeah, we want to support this. Every time this comes up to the SEEDS Commons, I'm going to vote for this organization because I really care about their work because I really understand it. So that's a couple of the, the reasons we're making these videos, I guess. That helps.
Yes, that helps. That helps. So tell me a bit more. And let's split this. My other theme is a deeper dive into how what we're doing can be helpful to you, down into some practical nitty-gritties. But if you could continue down this theme, a bit more depth in terms of what are the kinds of people that are already in the community, what are the kinds of things that, what are the kinds of activities that resonate with their preferred arenas of contribution and their essence of what they stand for in life?
Sure. Well, I think that the broader picture is people who are serving, game B, the transition, whatever we want to call it. People who are about building new social systems, having healthier communities, and kind of rethinking economies. And they're needing support and setting up these new structures for their own organization. And this is where I think you come in, because you've been doing a lot of thinking here. Is they're going to need support for setting those structures up. You can be like, here, I can lend that support. There's a number of tools out there. HIFA can offer the Do, for example, is one of the tools that you're using, along with all the other open source tools and available tools that we have to coordinate. And you can help actually bring these tools together and also support and, providing templates and helping groups get started. So, our goal is to be able to save groups, 2 years and 80% failure rates, because a lot of that happens in the first time when they're trying to decide, how do we decide? How do we structure ourselves? How do we distribute value? Those conversations can go so deep and so lateral so fast that, the momentum can get lost and people can get distracted, and the reason they all showed up to do stuff, never gets accomplished. So I think that's where you can really support the ecosystem. You say, hey, I've got some templates and models. I've been supporting groups doing this. I would like to help, organizations that are forming within the Renaissance get set up. And that's kind of my contribution to the Commons. And if you guys could pay me through the Commons to do that work for the community, awesome. And that's kind of how the Commons works, is then the Commons has a working budget to pay all of these organs that the ecosystem needs to serve itself. And this is one of those kind of functions. So this is also how we're remodeling how, a nation state, so to speak, runs its budget, instead of an extreme minority kind of setting the budget based off vested interests. Exactly what happens in the US with the military industrial complex. Now we're saying, no, the community kind of sets that budget through all this voting process. And we do that by different commons organizations coming up and saying, hey, we want to support the commons and here's our offering to the world, which is going full circle, is kind of helping create a nice package for you there of what I'm seeing right now. Is that helpful?
That is very helpful. That is helpful. And so this is something where, so I'm starting to get an understanding. Now, when you talk about the the community sets the budget, are we talking here about seeds or dollars, or what are we talking about when we talk about budget?
Well, both. So the tool we're building right now, I think it's actually almost in beta anyway, is for all the citizens to be able to vote for a particular budget. So we can have an ecosystem budget that looks like, hey, we're spending 20% for movement building and 30% for education and infrastructure, whatever. So same way we set nation budgets today, this much for housing, healthcare, etc. We do the exact same thing. But then the citizens at large are saying, okay, we have 20% of our budgets for this. The budget is when people are buying seats, and this is the fiat equivalent. Who they're buying them from is the commons. So that's building our community treasury that's going to then support all the commons organizations, right? So now when anyone goes to join seeds.earth and they buy seeds, the money that they're paying in is going to this treasury that we're using to pay out for people to pay rent and buy food. In addition, the Seeds Commons is also controlling seeds. So it's being able to issue some of those and do stuff with them. So they're controlling the seed sale. But mostly it's going to be managing this fiat budget, assuming that, well, fiat equivalent rather, assuming that everyone who's getting paid in the commons wants to, cash out and pay rent and day-to-day stuff. And currently seeds aren't liquid enough to serve that role. Simultaneously, the commons organizations are getting an alliance share in seeds. So they're getting a pool of seeds with their name on it. So that's part of their vested interest. And then they can start issuing those seeds through their own tokens. So you can create your own unique token, your own due, and your own organization and start distributing out to people who are contributing to your organization. And then those tokens represent all the value that your organization holds, which might be a Seeds Alliance share. So maybe you're holding on to 1 million seeds or 100 million seeds or whatever. So as the value of seeds goes up, the treasury you're holding goes up. So the token value that's backed by your treasury is going up with it. So that kind of is what aligns the whole ecosystem's, interests in supporting the same, building the same economy.
Yes. Okay. This is sounding then very close to how we're operating.
Exactly.
So,
which is why I think it's a perfect fit.
Yes. Okay. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I just want to go off on a slight tangent here, if I may, which is I, over the past, probably 18 months ago, since I first came into contact with Telos and had conversations with Suvi, must be 18 months ago now. So I've come to the conclusion that Telos is the best blockchain out there for what we want to do, in particular, how it's been governed and how it's been started. But I'd love to hear from you. Why is it that you chose Telos as the basis for Seeds?
Yeah, a couple reasons, and it's how we started thinking about this to begin with. So Seeds started as a peer-to-peer local food economy. We wanted a better than free currency so that we can have a peer-to-peer food platform that was better than free to use. Because the problem, there's a lot of local food platforms that have been set up, like grow food, not yards, cook food out of your house, sell it to your neighbors, etc. But they've all failed and had problems scaling because they had a really difficult time monetizing. Because if you're taking a fee from, me and my neighbor, him selling me a pie, maybe the first time I'll use the platform, but every time after that, I'll be like, hey, Bob, I'll just hand you $5 and, give me the pie. Which is what happens, right? So we needed a platform that's actually better than free to use. So this is where, the financial system component actually came from, is that idea. So when we were out there looking for platforms, well, we had to have one that was free. And I was, pretty familiar with blockchains and crypto. I was part of Steam in the early days and BitShares, and these are both delegated proof of stake systems that are before EOSIO and where Telos came from. And they all had this free model. They had a different way of securing the network that didn't require fees. It's brilliant. And we're like, cool, so we could start off with a free currency. All right, well, that's a necessity. So that's where, EOSIO was the choice of use. As we said, well, we wanted to be better than dollars to spend. No crypto today is better than cash to spend. Cash is anonymous, it's instant, no one knows where it's going or who it's coming from, like boom, cash, easy. But we needed a currency that's, hey, this is better than cash to spend. So again, we needed free. So that was a huge reason. Why we went to Telos instead of EOS is just Telos was a grassroots launch of the USIO tool. So we had a blockchain that was able to do incredibly, and there was like 10,000 transactions per second they've clocked it at, which relatively Bitcoin was like 17, 14 or whatever. Incredibly environmental friendly, so it doesn't have proof of work. Proof of work is what burns electricity. So the blockchain only uses the electricity needed to run the network. So it's like a couple washing machines is I think what Telos is running on. Last time I talked to Doug, he's like, yeah, we can, it's like one laundromat of electricity a year. It's like, okay.
Yes. I last talked to him a couple of months ago, and at that stage, he said it was, I think, 5 tumble dryers.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So we're only burning electricity to run the network. I think was great. And then it was innovating on governance. So it was going to be a network governed directly by the people through representative votes by voting in block producers. I thought that was great too. But in their original SEEDS white paper, we were actually going to run our own blockchain, and maybe we still do in the future if we need to. And there's a different way of actually electing the block producers, because the problem with both Telos and EOS is they're still governed by the token, and that token is exchangeable, ergo it's an oligarchy. And then what happens also is like exchanges get a whole bunch of tokens, and then they just get to decide, who the block producers are. So that's a problem I think that needs to be addressed. I know Telos is actually doing it. They like a mix of, how you actually vote for who's securing the network. SEEDS, for example, is going to have the SEEDS Council, or the constitutional guardians, and they're going to be the ones that hold the multi-signature authority over all of SEEDS contracts. So that's kind of the same concept. So anyway, that was a necessary piece, is to be able to have an anti-fragile blockchain that if problems arise, the community can gather together and through a very strong governance process, fix the network or evolve the network if needed. So that was a really strong incentive to go with the USIO frame. But anyway, Telos, it's the community. Douglas as the lead over there, and we were talking to him all the way back from the beginning, and he's super aligned with regeneration and local food and, building solar punk cities. So we kind of see the same vision from that angle. So it's just a really beautiful community, and it just made a lot of sense. But I think the future for SEEDS isn't really being on any one blockchain anyway. So SEEDS already exists on Ethereum, for example. We're building bridges to the Cosmos ecosystem. So there's a lot of ecosystems. I think we have to kind of move out of tribalism and move more into networked multiculturalism, where we're interoperable with a lot of different, layer 1 communities, but still be really good relationships and friends with the communities that we're connecting with. So anyway, that's the long story of Telos.
Right. That is very, very helpful to me, very helpful indeed. And that's a bit of a precursor to my next, let me call it question 1.5, because it sits between question 1 and question 2, which is one of the things that we're looking for is somebody who actually has experience in building a complementary currency system, which is at the end of the day going to span multiple capitals, each having their own native token with the right behavior for that token, and beginning with something that is quite a lot like what you've built for Hypha and SEEDS, but where we want it to be something that is within our ecosystem rather than merging two distinct ecosystems. So is that something where there are people in the SEEDS community who would love to dive into that?
Yeah, I mean, and really depending on what lens you're looking at, it's already happening. There isn't really this distinct ecosystem thing anyway, especially when we have open source tools and technology we're building in the open. So anyway, all of SEEDS could just be forked and copied if there doesn't anything that's being built in SEEDS and Hypha. If it's not, there's no desire there to merge ecosystems and build together, then you can literally copy everything and go and build a distinct ecosystem if you want. The reason we call it Hypha to begin with is Hypha is the mycelial network. It's little hairs in the forest that help, different kingdoms communicate with each other, right? So that was our role, is we wanted to actually help this distinct ecosystem approach, which I really believe is just kind of a product of capitalism and isolationism, and we need to be the company and brand to save the world kind of thinking. But I also think there's a biological component. When you prick a cell, you take a little needle and you poke a cell, there's this biological response to contract, to isolate, to separate itself from the rest and protect itself. So I think that's what's happening with communities across the globe, is there's this drive to isolate and separate. And then that's just a pain response from this abusive global economic system, right? So I understand that response to try to be like, oh, well, we don't like this global one world currency idea, or, global coordination or any of that. But the fact of the matter is our global crises require global coordination. We're not going to solve climate change with one community agreeing to do so. We need, communities across the globe to work out how to coordinate to make these challenges.
Exactly.
So that's kind of why we're approaching it. Look, like we're building tools for communities to build their own type of, value systems and social systems and their own policies and their own roles. But we're doing it in a way that it's all interoperable, so we can learn together and that we can exchange value across the whole ecosystem. So that's what we're saying. We're saying build together. Let's build within interoperable tools so that we can evolve together, learn together, and start coordinating together. Then let's also start interweaving all of our values together. So as we're making tokens, let's make sure we're doing token swaps. That's what SEEDS is all about. Like, hey, you're being regenerative. We have this alliance program where we're just going to literally give you SEEDS to say thank you for all the work you've done so far for the Renaissance, and to align our interests to keep growing this together. And that helps us actually network and coordinate as a whole. So then we start looking like our own nation states instead of 100 million diverse organizations across the globe trying to fight climate change and make any.
Reiki, I have lost hearing you. Can you hear me? Reiki, are you there?
All the shots we needed to.
Hello.
Really solve our crisis.
Reiki, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep. When did I?
Right. If you can hear me, it's been breaking up for about the past minute. I was hearing coordinate, learn together, interweave together, mutual token exchange. And then from that point on, it began breaking up.
Right. Well, long story short, it was that I think we need to approach more of a networked, interoperable approach, which is how SEEDS is building the tools. Like, you could take them, fork them, build your own if you want, but we're aligning all the incentives for you to come in, get an alliance share, be part of the ecosystem, and move together as a whole, and join this kind of global economic force that can start acting and influencing the global stage. So rather than us, globally being paralyzed by our inept nation states and their leaders, we can coordinate together and bring the hundreds of millions of people across the globe who want change to actually enact it together. So I think that is the power of making it one integrated ecosystem rather than, distinct ecosystems.
Perfect. So, as is often the case, words are as powerful a source of bonding and clear communication as they are a source of separation and miscommunication. So I completely agree with everything you're saying, and that's very much our vision as well. When I was talking about distinct ecosystems, I was more specifically focusing in, perhaps I should call it distinct treasuries. And that's what I'm after, that our treasury is not simply merged with your treasury as one larger pot of money.
Exactly. No, that's critically important. And yeah, that's necessary. Just like the body, you know, the hormones that the brain uses to communicate within the brain are different than it uses to communicate with other parts of the, you know, entity that is a human. Absolutely. I think every organ and organization within SEEDS has its own treasury. Yeah, for sure. And that's how the do is actually set up, is each do, and what makes you a different do is a different treasury. And every circle within that do can also have its own treasury. So then your organs within your own organization could all have their own unique treasuries, and that can fractal down infinitely. And that's actually how organizations scale, is through fractaling that treasury process down. Exactly.
That's what I'm after, is, you know, when I talk about a different ecosystems, I mean, there's the ecosystem of your treasury writ large, which might have sub treasuries within it, or complementary treasuries, or whatever, you know, a completely scale invariant fractal relationship of treasuries. And we're building the same thing. And because, you know, and this is where the whole spirit of the Fair Shares Commons comes in. Whether you implement a Fair Shares Commons as a DAO, as a do, as a incorporated company in Delaware, or wherever you do it, however you do it, it automatically leads to an exchange of tokens, shares, whatever you call the things that carry the right to engage in governance and the right to some share of the wealth being generated. The Fair Shares Commons automatically does that. As soon as two entities begin to interact with each other, they begin to connect their ecosystems in a way that maintains the uniqueness and the separation, and builds a concretization of the substance of the relationship. So, you know, it reflects the importance of the semi-permeable membrane in nature. Of there's a membrane that keeps you separate and distinct, and it has carefully guarded and governed channels that allow things to come in and go out.
Totally, 100%.
Right. So
we're just using two different maps. I explained that I think it's important for us to be one human body, you know, one metahuman. And you're like, yep. And in that metahuman, it's important for every organ to have its own boundaries. Yes. It's like, yep, important. So yes.
Exactly. That's the thing. Okay, so I think we're on the same page, and equally in that sense, you know, this is why our book is Creative Commons protected, because we want everybody who might benefit from it to use the book. We want people to create forks, to create different variants, to experiment, so that my ideal would be we have, over the next years, hundreds of variations of the Fair Shares Commons being experimented with across all kinds of implementations, be it oh shit, we're at the top of the hour already. Be it a DAO or an incorporation, so that the competition between the experiments can figure out what's best in which context for which purpose.
Exactly. And so that's where Fair Shares overlaps with other ecosystems. But where SEEDS and Fair Shares overlaps is all of those organizations that are doing it for the aim of a regenerative civilization, systems change for regeneration. Yes. And all those experiments under that purpose and vision. Now, experiments that are out there being like, well, how do we improve capitalism, or how do we fix Wall Street, and how do we, all those are still going to happen, but they just don't happen within the context of SEEDS, right? And I think that's what you could then offer the SEEDS community and say, hey, let's set this fair share SEEDS ecosystem. This is where we overlap. And you understand the fractaling process of where, you know, the organizations sit within the whole and how value flows throughout them, et cetera. So you help them organize where they best fit into the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
You can play that kind of like onboarding role, welcoming in. There's a group, yes, they have a vision, awesome. You can help them, you know, realize that vision and where that vision fits into the whole.
Yes.
And then design their value flows, set up a do, set up a DAO, et cetera.
Yes, yes, exactly. Beautiful, Reiki. We're at the top of the hour. I'm coming out of this well pleased with what has emerged and looking forwards to taking this further.
Perfect. Yeah, so then some quick takeaways. We can use this video as that intro video if you even want. You can make another one and then just have a document that we'll put up in the Git books. So we'll add it to the official SEEDS Commons proposed organizations. And then we can share that with the citizens of SEEDS and have you present at the next Regenerative Roundtable, which is on the solstice equinox coming up in March. So at that next event, you can actually come propose the model and we can officially vote you in, and or don't, but I believe the citizens probably would. I will. And we'll go from there.
Perfect. We take that as a plan. Beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you, Reiki. Please send me the recording link.
Oh, yes, I will.
Great. Thank you. Cheers.